The sun dipped behind the crumbling rooftops of Asafo, one of the neighborhoods in Kumasi, as 14-year-old Owusu Ansah lay sprawled on his bed. It was a bed that had seen better days just like everything else in his life. But to him that didn't matter. What mattered were the lyrics scribbled on the sheets of paper scattered around him, words that came to life with every heartbeat, every thought. His voice was his escape, and the melodies he created were the only way he could breathe. Owusu. His father's booming voice snapped him back to reality. Is this why we send you to school? Instead of studying, you're here playing with nonsense. Owusu sighed, rolling his eyes as he stuffed the papers under his pillow. Yes, da. You'll see what I'll do to you one day, his father muttered, leaving him in peace for the moment. School had never been easy for Owusu. No matter how hard he tried, the numbers and formulas in his textbooks and on the blackboard seemed like a foreign language. But music? Music spoke to him like a friend. During class breaks, he'd huddle with a group of friends, drumming beats on desks and freestyling lyrics that made everyone laugh, clap, and cheer. Even the teachers sometimes paused to listen, but they'd never admit it. Owusu, you're going to be a star one day, his friend Afia would always say, her eyes wide with excitement. One day, he'd smile back, you'll see me performing at the big concerts. But dreams and reality had a way of clashing. Owusu's parents, Mr. Ajiyama and May Mama, were traditionalists, firm believers that school was the only path to a better life. When they found out Owusu had been spending more time on his music than his studies, they were furious. One evening, after he returned from school, he found his father standing beside a small fire in their compound, feeding every one of his lyric sheets to the flames. No. Da, please? Owusu cried, rushing forward, but Mr. Ajiyama held him back. This is nonsense. This music of yours won't feed you, won't put a roof over your head. You think life is a joke? Mr. Ajiyama yelled, his eyes ablaze with anger and fear. May Mama stood by, arms crossed. Your future is in education, Owusu. Not these useless songs. Do you think we will allow you to use music as an excuse to become a burden on us? Owusu fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he watched his dreams turn to ashes. He wanted to reach out in the fire to redeem some of the papers, but it was too late. That night, he locked himself in his room, tossing and turning on his bed, the echoes of his father's words ringing in his ears. But beneath the hurt, a flicker of defiance burned brighter than ever. I won't let this be the end, he whispered to himself. I'll make them see. With his school grades plummeting, Owusu began to take drastic measures. Every week, he'd save the small lunch money his parents gave him, and instead of buying food, he'd sneak off to the local recording studio, a tiny room run by a man named Bokai Beats. "Yai, small boy, you again?" Bokai would always say when Owusu showed up. "Why don't you go and read your books?" "I need to record, please," Owusu would plead, pushing a handful of notes into Bokai's hand. Bokai would smirk, shaking his head. "One day you'll realize this music thing isn't for you. But until then, hop in." Owusu poured his heart into those sessions, singing and rapping like his life depended on it. But no matter how hard he tried, the engineers would just not pay attention. They treated him as just another kid with big dreams. They'd often dismiss him, delete his recordings, or worse, laugh at his lyrics. One day, as Owusu sat outside the studio, hungry and dejected, Afia found him. "Owusu, what are you doing?" "Trying to make them listen," he muttered. "But no one believes in me." Afia sat beside him, holding out fan milk and meat pie. "Maybe they don't, but I do. And that should be enough." The day of the final exams came, and Owusu stared blankly at the questions in front of him. He knew he hadn't studied, knew that failure was inevitable. When the results were released, his worst fears came true. He hadn't passed. The shame was unbearable, but what came next was even worse. "You will resit the exams," Mr. Ajiyama announced, slamming his fist on the table. "You'll do it until you pass." "I'm not interested in schooling anymore," Owusu declared, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "I want to do music." Mr. Ajiyama delivered a heavy slap to Owusu's cheeks when he coughed out those words. May Mama gasped. "Have you lost your mind? How will you survive?" "I'll find a way," Owusu insisted, his voice shaking. "I'll make it." "Then from today you're on your own," Mr. Ajiyama said coldly, turning his back on his son. And just like that, Owusu was alone. He left school, took on menial jobs, carrying bricks at construction sites, fetching water for neighbors, and carrying heavy loads at the market. The money was barely enough, but he saved every sadi he could, slowly buying bits and pieces of studio equipment until he built a makeshift recording studio in his room. "Why are you doing this to yourself?" Afia asked him one night when she came over. "You could have a better life." "This is the only life I want," he replied, plugging in his headphones. The world will hear me one day. Despite all his efforts, Owusu's songs were met with silence. He would post links to his songs on his page, but only few would even download it. His friends stopped answering his calls, and even Afia, his biggest supporter, began to doubt. Maybe it's time to let it go, she suggested gently. You've tried and we are growing, you can't just live like this. You have to learn a skill. No, Owusu said, his voice raw with pain. I'll upload everything online, and if nothing happens, then maybe I'll quit. That night, with trembling hands, he uploaded his music to various platforms, praying for a miracle. Weeks passed, and Owusu slipped further into despair, convinced he had wasted his life. But then, one morning, he woke up to dozens of notifications on his pages, and a lot of missed calls from his friends and chunk of messages flooding his phone. Owusu, your song is trending. It's everywhere. Afia screamed when he finally picked up. 3 of his tracks had gone viral. They were the most played songs on many platforms. The world had finally heard him. His songs were played at international events, celebrities were singing his lyrics, and then the email came, a contract from an international label. We want to fly you to the USA, the email read. You're exactly what the world needs. Owusu Ansah stared at the screen, tears blurring his vision. He had done it. He had taken every punch life threw at him and turned it into a symphony. He had made lemonade out of every lemon life gave him. The day he boarded the plane to the US, his heart raced. He thought of his parents, the fire that had destroyed his first lyrics, the countless nights he went to bed hungry, and the heavy concrete he carried under the scorching sun. Landing in New York, he was met with flashing cameras, a crew, and a nice car waiting to whisk him away. It felt like a dream, one he never wanted to wake up from. Some months ago he was just roaming around Kumasi with nothing to his name, and now he was a global star. In the months that followed, Owusu performed on international stages, collaborated with some of the biggest names in music, and finally sold out the Madison Square Garden. Something even the most seasoned artists in his country only dreamed of. And as he stood on that stage, staring at the thousands of faces cheering his name, Owusu took a deep breath, gripping the microphone. My name is Owusu, and I'm just a boy from Kumasi who refused to give up. Owusu knew his journey was far from over. The world was listening now, and he had so much more to say. Owusu Ansah had become a global superstar, but with fame came a whole new set of challenges. Everywhere he went, he was met with the flash of cameras, interviews, and endless meetings. The world wanted a piece of him, and the boy from Kumasi who once had to beg for studio time was now the most sought-after artist in the music industry. But the demands of fame began to take their toll. Late nights, early mornings, and the constant pressure to release hit after hit left him feeling drained. Owusu found himself longing for the days when it was just him, his makeshift studio, and his music. One evening, after performing at a sold-out concert in Los Angeles, he sat in his hotel room, staring at the city lights. His phone buzzed with messages from record executives, friends he hadn't heard from in years, and even his parents who had started reaching out to him again after his success. Are you okay? It was a text from Afia, who had stayed back in Kumasi. She was the one person who never asked for anything, who never changed. I don't know, Owusu typed back. I thought this was everything I wanted, but why do I feel so empty? Maybe you've forgotten why you started, Afia replied. Remember how you felt when you first wrote your songs? Go back to that place. Owusu stared at her words for a long time. She was right. He had become so caught up in the fame, the money, and the expectations that he had lost sight of the pure joy that music once brought him. He made a decision that shocked everyone. He canceled his upcoming shows, turned down interview requests, and took the next flight back to Ghana. He needed to reconnect with himself, with the boy who once believed that music was his only chance at life. When he arrived in Kumasi, he went straight to the house he grew up in. It looked the same with its faded paint and rusted iron gate. His parents were waiting for him, unsure of how to act around their now famous son. Owusu, his mother Maimama began, her voice shaky, we're so proud of you. He looked at them, at the people who had once burned his lyrics, who had given up on him, and he felt a surge of emotion. Why did you do it? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why did you burn my dreams? His father, Mr. Asayama, lowered his head. We were afraid, son. We didn't understand your passion. We wanted you to have a secured future. Owusu sighed, the tension in his chest easing a bit. You can't always protect someone from their own dreams, da. For the first time in years, they all sat down together, talked, and listened. They laughed about the past, cried over the hardships, and slowly began to heal old wounds. Owusu had one more dream to fulfill. He took the money he had earned from his music career and used it to build a music school in his hometown. He wanted to create a place where young boys and girls who felt the way he once did could have a space to explore their talents, to be heard and to feel seen. The opening day of the school was a grand affair. As Owusu stood on the stage, looking at the eager faces of the students who had come from all over Kumasi and beyond, he felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had felt before. "Music saved my life," he began, his voice steady. "It gave me a voice when no one would listen. And now it's your turn. Use this gift, this space, and let the world hear you." The crowd erupted into applause, and Owusu looked out to see Afia standing at the back, tears in her eyes and a proud smile on her face. She mouthed the words, "I told you you'd be a star," and Owusu couldn't help but laugh. Months later, Owusu found himself standing backstage at the Madison Square Garden, preparing for the biggest concert of his life. He was no longer the boy from Kumasi, he was a global sensation. But as he stared at his reflection in the mirror, he felt that familiar flicker of doubt. "Are you ready?" a voice asked, and he turned to see his manager who had flown with him from Ghana. Owusu took a deep breath. "I've been ready my whole life." The lights dimmed, the crowd roared, and as Owusu stepped onto the stage, the weight of his journey hit him. He saw the faces of the people who had doubted him, the engineers who had dismissed him, his parents who had tried to protect him from his own dreams, and the friends who had stood by him. He grabbed the microphone and for a moment the world stood still. "This one," he said, his voice echoing through the arena, "is for anyone who was ever told they couldn't. For everyone who had to fight to be heard. Tonight we rise." As the first notes of his hit song played, Owusu closed his eyes, let the music wash over him, and poured every ounce of his soul into the performance. It was more than a concert. It was a testament to his journey, his struggles, and the boy who refused to give up. By the time he finished, the crowd was on their feet, chanting his name. Owusu looked up, tears streaming down his face, and whispered, "Thank you." It was a thank you to his parents, to Afia, to the people who believed in him, and to himself for never letting go of the dream. As he walked off the stage, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Afia, who had flown all the way from Kumasi just to see him perform. "You did it," she whispered, her eyes shining. "We did it," Owusu corrected, pulling her into a hug. Owusu's story became the stuff of legends. He continued to make music, inspire young artists, and build schools across Ghana. But he never forgot where he came from. Every year he'd return to Kumasi, to the music school he built, and tell the students the story of a boy who wasn't academically sound but had a dream bigger than the world. And as they listened, with wide eyes and hopeful hearts, Owusu would smile and say, "You can be anything you want to be. Just don't stop moving, don't stop dreaming, and don't ever let anyone tell you you're not good enough." The end, but the music lives on.